Here's the reality. After 70, decluttering mistakes hit harder than ever before. At this stage of life, every choice carries emotional weight, and one wrong decision can change everything. Imagine clearing out a box in haste and discovering later that it held the only letters your spouse wrote during your courtship. Or giving away a piece of furniture, only to find out your children had quietly attached their childhood memories to it. These aren't just things, they are lifelines, and once they are gone, the absence can leave wounds that never heal. Decluttering isn't simply about creating more space. Past 70, it can mean rewriting the story of your life, sometimes in ways you never intended. A single mistake can tear families apart, erase irreplaceable memories, or even strip away your independence if you toss items that actually support your safety and comfort. Too often, people think letting go is always positive, but past a certain age, the wrong step can replace freedom with isolation and peace with regret. That's the harsh truth. You can't undo it once it's done. Every photo, letter, and object carries history, and deserves a second thought before it leaves your hands. That's why today's discussion matters. Before we uncover these irreversible mistakes, hit like and subscribe now, because what you learn in the next few minutes could spare you or someone you love from heartbreaking consequences that can never be undone. Meet Altheon Briggs, 74, a retired factory worker from Ohio whose life tells the story of many seniors. After decades on the assembly line, Altheon finally had the time he thought he always wanted. His modest home was more than just brick and mortar. It was a place woven with laughter, struggles, and memories spanning nearly half a century. Every corner held something meaningful: his wife's porcelain figurines collected from yard sales, the medals his children won in school competitions, the faded recliner where he napped after long shifts, and stacks of boxes he swore he'd go through one day. But when that day finally came, Altheon thought he was ready. His children encouraged him to start decluttering, reminding him that downsizing would make life easier and safer. What he didn't realize was that decluttering after 70 is not just about removing clutter, it's about making decisions that can shape family relationships, memory, and even independence. In his eagerness to create order, Altheon made choices that seemed harmless at the time but carried consequences he could never reverse. One afternoon, while sorting through an old trunk, he decided to toss a pile of letters, thinking they were just bills and receipts. Only later did he discover they were love notes exchanged with his late wife, each one capturing a piece of their journey together. The loss hit him like a wave, memories he could never hold again, erased by one rushed decision. Another time, he gave away a handcrafted wooden cabinet, not knowing his daughter had dreamed of keeping it as a link to her childhood. That single act created a quiet distance between them, a wound no apology could fully heal. What makes Altheon's story so powerful is that he isn't careless or thoughtless. He is deeply human, wanting to simplify his life, wanting to avoid burdening his children, wanting to do the right thing. And yet, the very process meant to bring peace left him facing regret, loneliness, and hard lessons about the cost of letting go too quickly. His journey reveals 7 brutal mistakes, each one a trap seniors can fall into when trying to declutter after 70. Mistakes that don't just rearrange a house, but reshape lives. And while Altheon can't undo them, you still can. His story isn't just a warning, it's a guide, a lived reminder that the line between freedom and regret is thinner than you think. Mistake 1. Turning heirlooms into battlefields. Altheon believed with all his heart that holding onto every heirloom was a way of protecting his family's legacy. To him, each object carried meaning: his father's pocket watch, his wife's quilt stitched by hand, the old rocking chair that had calmed his grandchildren to sleep. He thought he was doing the honorable thing, preserving history for the next generation. But when the time came to pass these items down, his good intentions turned into a source of pain. Instead of gratitude, the heirlooms sparked conflict. His children began to argue over who should receive what, each attaching their own memories and emotions to the objects. What was once a symbol of love became a spark for resentment. The heartbreaking truth is that heirlooms are never just things. They are emotional triggers. For one child, a quilt might symbolize warmth and security. For another, it might represent years of being overlooked. Without clear guidance, Families end up fighting over objects when what they are really fighting for is recognition, love, and connection. Altheon saw this firsthand as siblings who had once been close began keeping score, tallying up who got the more valuable pieces. Conversations grew tense. Holidays felt colder. The heirlooms he saved with such devotion became silent weapons of division. The lesson here is sobering. Saving everything doesn't protect family unity, it can destroy it. Seniors often underestimate how much baggage children attach to possessions. And by leaving every item for the family to sort out, you don't leave them an inheritance of love, but a battlefield of competing claims. That's not legacy, it's a landmine. The wiser path is intentionality. Instead of saving everything, choose with care. Talk openly with your children before decisions are forced. Ask what pieces hold the most meaning for them. Create clarity by labeling items or writing short notes about why they matter. In some cases, giving an heirloom early allows you to share its story directly, turning it into a gift rather than a source of tension after you're gone. Even donating or selling certain items while you're still alive can spare your family painful disputes later. Altheon's mistake shows that love isn't in the object itself, it's in how it's passed on. An heirloom handled with wisdom becomes a bridge between generations. Mishandled, it becomes the wedge that drives them apart. Mistake 2. Locking grief inside objects. When Altheon lost his wife, the silence in his home became unbearable. The chair where she once read her novels sat untouched. Her favorite cardigan still hung over the back of the sofa, as though she might slip it on again. In the closet, her dresses remained neatly arranged, their faint scent clinging to the fabric, and every time Altheon opened the door, memories flooded back with such force it nearly took his breath away. He believed keeping these things preserved her presence, but what he didn't see was how each object became a chain, binding him to sorrow instead of guiding him toward healing. For Altheon, every corner of the house became a shrine. The teapot she used on Sunday mornings, the perfume bottle on the dresser, even the slippers by the bed, none of them served a practical purpose anymore, but all of them whispered reminders of what he had lost. He convinced himself that letting go would mean betraying her, that discarding these things would erase her from his life. Yet as the months turned into years, his grief remained raw, unprocessed, and heavy. Rather than finding comfort, he was drowning in reminders that kept the wound fresh. This mistake isn't uncommon. Many seniors fall into the trap of holding onto grief objects, believing they are honoring their loved ones. But the truth is, surrounding yourself with too many objects of loss can freeze time. It prevents you from stepping into the present, and it robs your family of the joy they want to share with you now. Altheon's children felt it deeply. When they visited, they tiptoed around the house as though they were trespassing in a mausoleum. Their attempts to bring laughter or make changes felt disrespectful in a space that had been turned into a temple of sorrow. They loved their father, but they also longed to see him smile again, to engage with life, to join them in creating new memories rather than replaying the old ones. The brutal truth is that grief must move, breathe, and evolve, or else it hardens into something that suffocates. Objects cannot carry the full weight of love, nor should they. Altheon eventually learned that healing didn't mean forgetting, it meant choosing. He began by selecting a few treasures that truly captured the essence of his wife: her wedding band, a photograph of them at the county fair, and the quilt she had stitched during their first winter together. These he kept close, allowing them to represent her love without overwhelming his daily life. Slowly, he found the courage to release the rest, donating clothing, gifting certain keepsakes to his children, and creating space that allowed joy to return to his home. This shift was not easy, but it was transformative. His grandchildren began to play freely in the living room without sensing the weight of sorrow. His children could visit without fear of reopening wounds. And Altheon discovered something vital: his wife's memory was not locked in the objects she left behind. It lived in the stories he told, the lessons she had taught, and the love that still flowed through his family. Clinging to grief objects may feel like a way of holding on, but in reality, it holds you back. Altheon's journey shows that letting go is not betrayal, it is the doorway to healing. By releasing the shrine, he honored his wife not with endless sorrow, but with the freedom to live the rest of his years with love, laughter, and connection. Mistake 3. turning clutter into a health hazard. For years, Altheon convinced himself that the stacks of boxes lining his hallways and the piles of magazines by his recliner gave his home character. To him, the clutter felt like proof of a life well lived, evidence of decades of work, hobbies, and memories. He called it full of life, but the reality was far more dangerous. The once cozy home had slowly transformed into an obstacle course, narrowing pathways and covering floors that should have been clear. He had grown so used to stepping around the clutter that he no longer noticed the risk. That is, until one ordinary morning when a single misplaced step sent him crashing to the floor. What he thought was harmless clutter ended with an ambulance ride, hours in the emergency room, and weeks of painful recovery. The truth is stark. After 70, clutter stops being just an eyesore, it becomes a serious health hazard. Falls are the leading cause of injury among older adults, and even something as small as a stack of newspapers or a pair of shoes in the wrong spot can trigger a life-changing accident. Altheon had always thought of independence as the freedom to stay in his home, surrounded by his belongings. But the very items he clung to nearly cost him that independence overnight. One fall can lead to a hip fracture, long-term mobility issues, or even the difficult decision to leave the home you love for assisted living. What makes this mistake so brutal is that it creeps up slowly. Seniors often underestimate how much their balance, vision, and reaction time change with age. What felt easy to navigate at 50 becomes treacherous at 75. Altheon's fall was a wake-up call, not just for him, but for his children, who suddenly realized how unsafe his home had become. They loved his independence, but they feared every visit might be the day they'd find him hurt again. The lesson is clear. Clutter is not just about appearance, it's about safety. Every box in the hallway, every pile near the stairs, every chair blocking a pathway increases the risk of injury. The solution isn't to strip your home bare, but to be intentional. Clear walkways, keep floors free of obstacles, and create open, accessible spaces. If items hold value, store them safely out of traffic areas. Prioritize safety over sentiment, because the cost of ignoring this mistake is far higher than losing a few boxes. Altheon eventually understood that the true mark of independence isn't holding on to everything, it's creating a home where he could live safely and confidently. By clearing the hazards, he didn't erase his history, he secured his future. His story proves that what feels like harmless clutter can become the very thing that steals your freedom if you ignore it too long. Mistake 4: wasting money on storage units. When the clutter in Altheon's home began to spill out of closets, crowding hallways and filling every spare corner, he told himself he had found the perfect solution: rent a storage unit. It's just temporary, he said, stacking up boxes of old tools, worn furniture, and bins of clothes that hadn't been worn in decades. He convinced himself that one day he would sort through it all, pass it on to family, or maybe even sell some of it. But days became months, months became years, and before he realized it, a full decade had passed. The storage unit that was meant to hold treasures became nothing more than an expensive graveyard of forgotten possessions. Over those 10 years, Altheon spent more than $12,000 in rental fees, money that simply evaporated into thin air, keeping objects no one asked for, no one needed, and no one would use. What's worse, when he finally opened the unit again, he found that many items had been damaged by dust, moisture, or pests. Boxes collapsed under their own weight, clothes had mildewed, and furniture was warped. He had essentially paid thousands of dollars to preserve decay. The true loss, however, wasn't just financial, it was relational. That $12,000 could have funded family vacations, trips to visit his grandchildren, or simple moments like taking the kids to the zoo or treating the whole family to dinner. It could have brought memories that lived on in the hearts of those he loved instead of dust-covered boxes that no one wanted. By choosing to preserve stuff, he lost opportunities to create moments that truly mattered. This mistake is one many seniors fall into. Storage units feel like an easy answer to overflowing homes, but in reality, they delay decisions and drain resources. They give the illusion of solving the problem while quietly eroding savings that could be used for joy, health, or family. For seniors living on fixed incomes, the impact is even greater. What seems like just $100 a month quickly snowballs into thousands that can never be recovered. The lesson is not to avoid storage at all costs, but to be intentional. If an item is truly valuable, financially or sentimentally, it deserves a place in your home or in the hands of someone who will appreciate it. If it isn't, paying month after month to keep it hidden is a burden disguised as a solution. Downsizing isn't about loss, it's about redirecting your resources to what actually adds meaning to your life. Altheon eventually realized that the real treasure wasn't in those boxes, it was in the people waiting outside of them. By letting go of what he was paying to store, he gained freedom, financial relief, and the chance to invest in moments that would outlast any object. His story proves that storage units don't preserve memories, they steal them, one monthly payment at a time. Mistake 5. Failing to digitize the irreplaceable. Altheon kept showboxes stacked neatly in his basement, boxes filled with photographs, postcards, and handwritten love letters from his late wife. To him, these weren't just keepsakes, they were fragments of his life, a timeline of love and memory that stretched across decades. He often thought about scanning them someday, but someday never came. Then, one spring, a heavy rainstorm brought flooding to his neighborhood. By the time Altheon stepped into the basement, the water had already seeped through the boxes. Ink blurred into smudges, photos peeled apart in sticky clumps, and decades of irreplaceable history dissolved in a matter of hours. His deepest regret wasn't the flood itself, it was realizing he had waited too long to preserve what truly mattered. The loss cut deeper than he expected. Every photograph had once carried laughter, tears, and milestones. Birthdays with icing smeared across children's faces, anniversaries marked by candlelight, vacations where he and his wife grinned under the summer sun. Each love letter was a snapshot of devotion, a reminder of the early days when their love was still fragile and growing. Seeing them destroyed felt like losing her all over again. And though his children tried to comfort him, they, too, mourned the memories they could no longer hold in their hands or pass down to their children. This is a brutal mistake many seniors make, not because they don't care, but because they underestimate how fragile paper, film, and ink truly are. Fires, floods, pests, or even the simple passage of time can erase generations of history in an instant. Technology may feel overwhelming, but ignoring it means gambling with treasures that can never be replaced. Altheon learned too late that digitizing is not about letting go, it's about safeguarding. Today, scanning photos, letters, and documents is simpler than ever. A basic scanner, a smartphone app, or even a visit to a local library can turn fragile paper into secure digital files. These files can then be stored on external drives, shared with children, or backed up to the cloud, ensuring they survive beyond any single disaster. Digitizing also opens the door for connection. Grandchildren can flip through old albums on a tablet, family members can share stories while looking at scanned letters, and loved ones can preserve a legacy that feels alive, not lost in a damp box. The lesson here is urgent: don't wait. Protect the pieces of your life that tell your story. While no technology can recreate the exact feel of your spouse's handwriting or the texture of old photographs, digitizing ensures the essence, the words, the images, the love endures. For Altheon, the flood was a devastating teacher. He couldn't bring back what was lost, but he could warn others. His story proves that the true regret isn't disaster, it's delay. What you choose to preserve today could become the legacy your family treasures tomorrow. Mistake 6. Forcing your family to be the cleanup crew. For years, whenever his children gently suggested he declutter, Altheon would brush them off with the same response: "The kids can deal with it when I'm gone." He thought he was being practical, sparing himself the hassle of sorting through decades of belongings. What he didn't realize was that his choice wasn't a gift of inheritance, it was a burden disguised as one. When seniors leave their homes full of clutter, what children inherit is not just objects, but grief wrapped in cardboard boxes, guilt hidden in dusty closets, and secrets unearthed at the worst possible time. When Altheon's neighbor passed away, he saw firsthand what leaving it for the kids really meant. The man's daughters spent months clearing out their childhood home, sifting through mountains of paperwork, broken appliances, and boxes of things no one recognized. Instead of being able to grieve peacefully, they argued over what to keep, what to throw away, and what each item might mean. Tears of sorrow turned into frustration, and the process strained their relationships. Watching them, Altheon began to understand the cruelty of his own words. The truth is, clutter left behind becomes an emotional minefield for families. Every object forces a decision at a time when emotions are already raw. Children may stumble across hidden debts, painful reminders, or even private items never meant to be found. Each drawer becomes a confrontation with the past, each pile a reminder of loss. Instead of celebrating their parents' life, they spend weeks, or even years, wrestling with their mess. And for many, this process creates bitterness that lingers long after the boxes are gone. The brutal mistake isn't just leaving stuff. It's leaving the responsibility of sorting it to those already weighed down with grief. Altheon eventually realized that his clutter wasn't just his problem, it was his family's future burden. By refusing to make decisions while he was alive, he would be forcing his children to make them in the shadow of his death. That is not love, that is punishment. The wiser path is to act now. Start small, one drawer or one box at a time, but be intentional. Decide what truly matters, and release the rest. Share stories with your children about the items you keep, so they inherit not just the object but its meaning. If something has no story, let it go. This not only frees you, but it frees them from the crushing weight of sorting through the unknown. Altheon came to see that the best inheritance he could leave his children wasn't furniture, clothes, or dusty boxes. It was clarity, peace, and space to grieve without being buried in responsibility. His change of heart proved a powerful truth. Leaving clutter behind doesn't show love, clearing it away does. Mistake 7. Avoiding the conversation declutter. For Altheon, the hardest mistake wasn't about boxes, furniture, or even the photos that were lost, it was about silence. He never told his children which items carried meaning, which ones were just things, or what he hoped would happen after he was gone. To him, the meaning felt obvious. He assumed his children would understand, or that the objects would speak for themselves. But when they eventually discovered his journals tucked away in a drawer, they froze. Were these pages sacred records of his thoughts, meant to be kept forever? Or were they private musings that he had never wanted anyone to see? Without his voice, every decision felt like a betrayal. The truth is that clutter isn't just physical, it's emotional. And the most painful clutter a family can inherit is uncertainty. Altheon's silence left his children second-guessing themselves with every item. Should they keep the stack of sermon notes he had scribbled during church services? Should they divide up his coin collection or leave it intact? Was the faded flannel shirt just another old garment, or was it tied to a memory they didn't know about? These unanswered questions created tension and guilt, turning ordinary objects into emotional landmines. This mistake is especially brutal because it's so easy to avoid, yet so rarely addressed. Many seniors shy away from having the conversation declutter because it feels uncomfortable. Talking about what should stay and what can go can feel like admitting that time is running short. But silence doesn't protect your family, it wounds them. Without guidance, they are left to argue, guess, or carry regrets that never fade. The lesson here is powerful. Communication is the most important form of decluttering. Take time to sit with your children or loved ones and explain the stories behind certain items. Share which objects hold deep meaning and which ones they can let go of without guilt. A 5-minute story about a photograph or a piece of jewelry can transform it from just another thing into a cherished legacy. Writing short notes or creating a simple memory map can spare your family years of confusion and conflict. Altheon eventually realized too late that the items themselves weren't the problem, the silence was. His children longed to hear his stories while he was alive, not guess at them after he was gone. Avoiding the conversation left scars that no object could heal. The truth is, the most valuable inheritance you can leave behind isn't the item itself, it's the meaning, the story, the voice that explains why it mattered. Without that, even treasures can feel empty. 4 years, Altheon's house had been heavy, with boxes, with memories, with silence. Each mistake had chipped away at his peace, turning what should have been a sanctuary into a burden. But his turning point came when he finally decided he didn't want his final gift to his children to be chaos. He wanted freedom, for himself and for them. His breakthrough was not a single action, but a series of choices that reflected wisdom, courage, and love. He began by addressing his deepest regret, the loss of photos and letters to the flood. Determined not to repeat that mistake, he carefully digitized the treasures he still had left. His daughter helped him scan photographs, while his grandson showed him how to upload them to the cloud. For the first time, he saw his memories come alive on a screen, shareable with family spread across states. It wasn't just preservation, it was connection. Now, those memories could never be washed away. Next, Altheon tackled his storage unit. For over a decade, he had been paying monthly fees to protect what turned out to be little more than forgotten clutter. With resolve, he opened the unit one final time and faced the truth. Most of what he had saved had no value, not to him and certainly not to his children. Piece by piece, he let go. Donating, recycling, discarding. The relief was immediate, not only in his wallet but in his spirit. He realized he hadn't been saving memories at all, he had been saving dust. And in releasing it, he gained back freedom and resources to spend on moments that mattered. But perhaps the most powerful change came when he invited his children into the process. Instead of waiting until he was gone, Altheon began sharing the stories behind his heirlooms while he was alive. Around the dinner table, he passed on his father's pocket watch and told the tale of how it ticked through years of long shifts at the factory. He gave his daughter her mother's quilt, explaining how every stitch had been sewn during the long winter nights after their first child was born. In those moments, objects transformed into legacies, not burdens. His family didn't just inherit stuff, they inherited stories, love, and clarity. Altheon's home grew lighter, but more importantly, so did his heart. He no longer walked through rooms shadowed by grief or cluttered with regret. Instead, he moved with a sense of peace, knowing his life was in order, his children understood his wishes, and his memories were safe. His story became proof that it's never too late to choose wisely, and that decluttering, done with love, can heal more than a house. After 70, mistakes weigh heavier. Don't let clutter rob your peace, your legacy, or your family's love. If this struck home, hit like right now. It tells YouTube seniors matter. Share this with a friend over 60 who's still holding on, and subscribe to Wise Aging Seniors, because aging should feel lighter, not heavier.